Apple's M3 MacBook Air is going to be absolutely insane in terms of performance, so fast that it's going to be faster than the M2 Pro chip in the base 14-inch MacBook Pro. And if you don't believe me, I'll prove it to you in this video. So if you're thinking about picking up the 14-inch Pro, you might just want to hold off. Now, before I jump into all the math using the new huge leak of the A17 Bionic chip's performance, you need to understand the relationship between Apple's A series iPhone chips and M series Mac chips. When the M1 chip was released, we quickly discovered that it packs CPU and GPU cores that came directly from the A14 iPhone chip, with them being basically identical. Now, of course, the M1 added a bunch of other stuff in there as well, but the cores themselves were the same, and that's what translates to the performance we see in benchmarks like Geekbench 6. The only difference is that for some reason, the single-core performance of the M chips are always higher than the A chips that they were based on. For example, the single-core performance of the M1 is actually 13.7% higher than the A14, even though the cores themselves are identical. Why? Well, because Apple is clocking those cores higher in the M1 chip. 3.2 gigahertz on the Mac instead of 3.0 on the iPhone and iPad. And same for the relationship between the M2 chip and the A15 that it was based on. The M2 was clocked at 3.5 instead of 3.2 on the A15, leading to a single core score that's 16.3% faster, even though the cores themselves are basically the same. So what I'm gonna do is take those numbers and apply them to the relationship between the upcoming A17 Bionic chip and, of course, the M3 Mac chip. And if you're wondering why I'm completely ignoring the A16 chip, it's because it doesn't actually matter to the M3 chip at all. It's already been confirmed that even though they're calling it a 4nm chip, it's really just 3rd Gen 5 nanometer with no legible technical differences compared to 2nd Gen 5 nanometer. But the biggest reason is that it's already been confirmed that both the A17 and M3 chips will be built using TSMC's brand new 3nm chip lithography process, which means that they'll share the same exact cores, just like what happened to the A14 and M1, as well as the A15 and M2. And yes, this means that the A16 chip is being completely skipped and forgotten when it comes to its impact on the M chip series, because if you didn't already figure out Apple's release cycle strategy, we get an A chip every single year in September, while we only get a new M chip every 1.5 years. So every now and then, an A chip must be completely skipped, and that's happening this year with the M3 chip being based on the A17 instead of A16. And now let's get into the math. A couple of weeks ago, TechReeve on Twitter shared leaked A17 Bionic chip benchmarks from a Korean website, and they actually make a lot of sense when comparing them to the A16. And by the way, we're going to be using Geekbench 6 exclusively for this video since it's been redesigned to be more realistic than ever before. As you can see, the A17 scores 3,019 points in the single-core test and 7,860 in multi-core. So to figure out the performance of the M3 chip, all we have to do is apply the percentage gains that we calculated earlier in this video when going from the A14 chip to the M1 and the A15 chip to the M2, and of course apply that to the M3. And since we got an average gain of the M chip being 15% faster than the respective A chip, all we've got to do is add 15% to the single core score of the leaked A17, and we end up with an estimate of 3,472 points for the M3 chip, making it the fastest stock chip in the world, surpassing the record-holding Intel i9-13900KS by about 13%. And then in Apple Silicon terms, that score is actually about 32% faster than the M2, a huge gen-over-gen improvement, which will lead to snappier web browsing and common app performance. However, one thing to note is that the A17 chip is rumored to come with 8 gigs of RAM instead of the previous 6, which gives an advantage to Geekbench scores, but the M3 chip will likely get the same 8 gigs of RAM as before, so the numbers might be a bit lower than these calculations. Just keep that in mind. Now moving on to multi-core performance, the M1 chip was about 69.5% faster than the A14, while the M2 chip was 78.5% faster than the A15, and those two numbers give us an average of 74% faster. So if we take the 7,860 score from the A17 leak and add 74% on top, we get 13,676 multi-core points for the M3 chip, making it a massive 41.5% faster than the M2. But here's something that some of you might not have expected. That 13,676 score officially makes the M3 chip 13.8% faster than the binned 10-core M2 Pro chip, which is kind of insane because that wasn't the case with the M2 chip at all, which was still behind the older M1 Pro chip. Now in terms of the unbinned 12-core M2 Pro, that model is still going to be faster than the M3 with scores above 14,000, but it's honestly not that big of a difference. And yes, I actually do believe that the M3 chip will be that fast, since the 3nm M3 chip family will be a huge advancement over the M2, which was basically just an overclocked stopgap chip. So essentially, the M3 MacBook Air will be faster than the base model 14-inch MacBook Pro in both single-core and multi-core. So if you're thinking about buying that 14-inch model right now, it could be a good idea to hold off and wait. However, the 14-inch Pro will still have features that you can't get on the M3 Air, like a 120Hz ProMotion display, all of the extra ports like HDMI, SD card, additional Thunderbolt, the dual fans, the larger display, bigger battery, etc. So if you want any of those features, you've still got to go up to the 14-inch, which is why it still makes sense in the lineup. And keep in mind that the 13-inch Air will likely still only come with 8 gigs of base RAM and a 256 gig SSD, half of what the 14-inch includes at the base price. So buyers will still be trying to figure out which one to buy based on their needs, even though the M3 Air will likely be faster. But the secret weapon of the M3 Air will be the new additional 15-inch model, which is going to be super appealing to a lot of people who previously purchased the Pro models just because of the larger display. Now, as far as the GPU performance, we still don't have any leaks of the A17 chip's graphics, so there's really no way to estimate the performance of the M3 chip. But one thing we do know is that Apple was working on a completely new GPU design that was meant for the A16 Bionic chip, but it had some flaws, so Apple reverted back to the old A15 chip's GPU. And yes, I mean that literally, because the die analysis shots of both A15 and 16 chips prove it. So essentially, we can expect a brand new GPU core design for the A17 chip built on 3nm and apparently with hardware ray tracing support built in. And of course, since the A17 and M3 chips will share the same exact cores, this means that the M3 will be getting them as well. So it's going to be a graphics beast. And on top of that, we can also expect new, faster versions of the media engine encoders and decoders, which will be helpful for anyone working with video footage. And as far as the release date, I personally don't think the M3 chip will be released until this fall, but who knows, maybe it's gonna come at WWDC like some others are guessing. So with that said, if this video made you excited about the new M3 chip, comment down below and click that circle button to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.